Welcome to There Is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's Fitness Programs, and I've been in business since 1994. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Glycemic Index, which I think is one of the most valuable pieces of information that you can know about nutrition. So, speaking of sweets, I want to thank our sponsors, Jonathan and Lyn Gildon at the Gildon Group of Realty Pros. They currently have over 275 star reviews on Zillow, and I absolutely vouch for them. True professionals. That's what I love about them. True professionals. Jonathan actually has a business degree from Florida State University. Along with the real estate degree, he majored in real estate, and his wife Lynn has an MBA. I think that's very important to be professionals in your field. That's why I trust them so much, and I will put their information in the show notes. All right, let's talk about the glycemic index. All right, so first off, when we're talking about losing weight, it all comes back to calories. That is absolutely a fact, so don't. Anytime I talk about nutrition topics, which as you all know, I love to do, just understand that everything still does go back to calories. But to make your life easier with that, and to most importantly make you healthier, then there are certain things about the types of food we eat that is very important. And glycemic index might be one of the most important things to understand. It's right up there with understanding saturated and polyunsaturated fats, and understanding the difference between processed and non-processed foods. So it's really important to understand the glycemic index. All right. So first off, what is it? The glycemic index is how quickly carbohydrates convert to glucose in your body. The faster it converts to glucose, the more sugary that food actually is. The slower it converts, the less like sugar that carbohydrate is, and the more of a complex carbohydrate that carbohydrate is. All right, that's really important. So complex carbohydrates actually store as glycogen. Glycogen is stored carbohydrate in your body and in your liver. That's a good thing. We can store up to 2,000 calories worth of carbohydrates in our body. 400 grams in the muscles, 100 grams in the liver. 100 grams in the liver. That's a lot. If we eat mostly complex carbohydrates, we're going to keep our energy reserves kept very high. So if we eat a lot of complex carbohydrates, let me restate that, you're going to keep your energy levels high because your cells are going to be filled up with glycogen. That's what we want. Now, high glycemic index foods, which you may call sugar, and I'm going to hammer that home here in a second, don't convert to glycogen nearly as quick, and maybe not at all. So high glycemic index foods, again, which you may call sugar, actually, when they start to digest and absorb into your bloodstream, they get used for immediate energy right now. All right. So if you're sitting around doing a podcast like I am right now, they're not going to have much work to do when we eat those high glycemic index carbohydrates, because I'm not in motion. I'm not moving. What is it going to do? It's going to circulate, realize it does not have a job to do, and you're going to store it as fat, not glycogen. You're going to store it as fat. But Rob, you said everything comes back to calories. It does, but now that little bit that you just stored has to come off later. So maybe it's better to not store it to begin with and only eat it when necessary, or you basically can't control yourself anymore. All right, so that's what glycemic index is. The quicker it converts to glucose, the higher the glycemic index is on the food. So for example, every food group that contains carbohydrates. And the only animal form of carbohydrate, by the way, is dairy. That is it. So dairy and then all plants are carbohydrates, right? And we need carbs. 60% of our diet should be carbs, but it should be complex carbohydrates, all right? So every different type of food has within it high glycemic, mid glycemic, and low glycemic, okay? Let's take fruits. Fruits can be high glycemic. Fruits can be low glycemic. This is why you just can't say, oh man, all fruits are sugar. Not true. Not true at all. If you eat berries, such as blackberries, strawberries, blueberries, and throw cherries into the berry department, those are actually low glycemic index fruits, so they convert very slowly. To keep this simple, that means good for you. Then on the other end, you have high glycemic index fruits. Pineapples, that's like one of the worst. Watermelons, melons in general, very high. You have, even within the same family, slight differences. Now, overall, apples are lower to mid glycemic index, so that's good. But within apples, there's even a breakdown. Granny Smith, which you probably can figure out, they're pretty tart and sour, right? Crispy and good, I love them. They're low glycemic, where Red Delicious are higher glycemic, but not high, all right? Oranges tend to be mid to low. Orange juice, very high. Why? Because all the fiber, which you call the pulp, all the fiber has been removed, and anytime you do that to a carbohydrate, you are now making the glycemic index much higher. So all juice is high, okay? All juice is essentially crap food. Try not to drink it. Pears are low. Now, here's a crazy one. Bananas. Bananas tend to be more mid, but get this. Very, very ripe bananas, which you would think are totally sugary, it's the opposite. They're lower glycemic. Unripe bananas are more high, all right? So, quick cheat sheet of fruits, all right? All berries, good to go. Apples and oranges, go for it. Bananas, I think, is one of the perfect fruit. Why? Because I can throw it next to me in my passenger side of my truck, and I have a pretty healthy snack, all right? They're not as low as berries, but they're pretty darn low. And again, the riper they are, the lower they are, all right? Now let's take vegetables. Think, oh, all vegetables are good for you. Well, again, you know, it's funny, and I'm going to be a little sarcastic here, but, you know, stuff like this as a professional kind of rattles my chain a little bit, drives me nuts, however I want to phrase it today. But I'll see people say online on social media, you know, the place where almost nothing good happens, right? Oh, I just found out that peas and carrots are high glycemic index foods or act like sugar, however they phrase it, right? That's why I'm gaining weight. I always shake my head and go, I really just don't think it's the peas and carrots, okay? Now, could it be compared to, say, broccoli and Brussels sprouts? Yes, but here's the deal. I just don't think people are eating enough peas and carrots to really spike that glucose too high. Having said that, if we're really trying to eat the best possible diet, then yes, pay attention to vegetables as well. As I just said, peas, carrots, and corn are on the higher glycemic index. Blood sugar converts quickly. Brussels sprouts, green beans, broccoli, cauliflower are all low glycemic index vegetables. All right. Now, here's some tips. First, look them up. It's not hard to find anymore. I mean, when I was in college, you know, we would search for glycemic index lists that were only in our nutrition books that we had. Well, I was in college in the late 80s, early 90s. Now you can simply Google it. It's a lot easier to pull up a glycemic index list. So that's one thing you can do. The second thing you can do is understand that the more natural fiber a plant has, the lower the glycemic index. All right. So there's that. Now let me talk about glycemic load. because really glycemic load is the most important concept of all of this. Glycemic load is the glycemic index, all right? So on a scale of, say, 0 to 100, 100 is going to be the highest glycemic index because that means it converts to glucose 100% of the time, that it's basically like pure glucose. And by the way, I believe on most glycemic index lists, you're going to see cornflakes at the very, very top of the glycemic index and orange juice being somewhere close to it too. And of course, all, pure synthetic foods like Coca-Cola are 100% high glycemic index types of foods. All right, so the glycemic load is the glycemic index times the amount of grams of carbohydrates in the food. So, as you see, you can manage your glycemic index foods. Let's just say you want to eat vegetables. And absolutely, I'm a proponent. Please, if you really think you're doing yourself a favor by eating what you think is a whole grain cracker that you think is low sugar because you don't want to eat carrots, well, you're kind of being ridiculous. Now, if you're splitting up vegetables, yes, but if you have a choice between a processed cracker and a vegetable, please eat the vegetable, even if it's peas, carrots, and corn. But anyway, getting back to my point. Let's say you love baby carrots. You take them to lunch. That's what you want to pack in your lunch because they're easy. You can get the little bags. And you understand now that they are kind of high in the glycemic index. If you don't eat that many, like a pack of them, I think it's 45 calories worth, you're going to keep your overall glycemic load down. Or you can binge on low glycemic index foods. Say, asparagus. Let's just say you eat pounds of asparagus, which is a very low glycemic index food. Maybe it's got a 20 rating to it, a 20 or a 30 rating to it, but you eat a ton of it. And now your glucose is going to spike because you just ate so many grams of carbohydrates, even though the glycemic load is low. So really it comes down to managing the load by not eating a whole lot. And by the way, one of the carbohydrates that is absolutely the best for you is legumes. Legumes are almost the perfect food, outside of maybe causing a little bit of gas in some people. And it does that because they're so high in fiber, which is one of the reasons why they're so low in the glycemic index. But legumes of any kind, pinto beans, black beans, split peas, all those kind of things. Split peas are not the same as eating peas, are all part of the legume family, as are peanuts, by the way. And they're very, very low in the glycemic index. Now, of course, you could eat like a whole jar of peanuts. I know I could. Now you're going to have a spike because you ate so much of them. But low glycemic index carbohydrates are the best way to manage our blood glucose levels. Understanding when we eat high glycemic index foods, if we don't eat a lot of them, we're going to keep our glycemic load down, which is ultimately what it's all about. Okay? So outside of the fact that when we eat high glycemic index foods and we don't use them, we store it as fat. The second problem with eating a lot of high glycemic index foods is that we spike our insulin levels every time we do. Okay? Insulin's job is to carry the glucose through the blood to where it is going. That is insulin's job. So as soon as we eat a sugary or high glycemic index food, our insulin levels spike to do their job. All right? That's their job. That is a good thing. But as we always say, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Insulin is there to do its job. But when we abuse it and we produce so much insulin, what happens is our cells, the receptor sites where this glucose is going, become resistant to the insulin. And that's what type 2 diabetes is. That means that the receptor cells are not accepting the insulin. And that's why type 2 diabetes is called insulin resistance diabetes. So it's not from too much of a production of glucose. It's from too little insulin to carry the glucose. So if we eat too much, we are putting too much of a strain on our system, producing too much insulin. And eventually the cells just say, we don't recognize you anymore. We've been too abused. We've been overused. And then you're into diabetic issues. All right. And the number one cause of type 2 diabetes, by the way, isn't overeating, but obesity, which kind of goes hand in hand with overeating. So the best thing we can do is learn that when we are not exercising, to do the best we can to eat low glycemic or mid-level glycemic index carbohydrates. They don't give you energy. So people think, oh, if I eat this sugar, I'm going to get some energy. Maybe for like 10 seconds, but really that's not really how it works anyway. But what you are going to get is a crash, because you're going to get your glucose levels higher, then your insulin levels are going to get higher, and then basically you're going to come crashing down. So it really doesn't do that anyway. The best way to have sustained energy is by eating a healthful diet all the time and eating majority of complex carbohydrates or lower to mid glycemic index carbohydrates throughout most of the day. All right, that's the best thing we can do. That's the best advice I can give you. Now, there is a time and a place. High glycemic index foods are essentially what are in sports drinks. That's what Gatorade is. Now, Gatorade is too diluted in sugar. There's too much sugar. So, quote, unquote, real athletes, I don't want to offend anybody, but people who are really training for things, the Olympics and all, okay, they're not using real Gatorade. Gatorade is basically nothing more than, say, Coca-Cola that's tinted orange and green. I mean, that's pretty much all of it is. Sure, it's got some electrolytes in it. And if you're out there and you're getting ready to have a heat stroke, by all means, drink that Gatorade. But for the most part, try to go with more sports drinks that are a little bit lower in the concentration of high glycemic index carbs or glucose. But that's when they work. When you're out there moving, you're training, you are lifting, you are biking hard, you're running. That's when this glucose or high glycemic index carbohydrates become very valuable. Now, most of them are set to be just enough. Okay, research shows we only need about 240 calories per hour of this at most sizes. That's not very much. That is less than a bottle of Gatorade, which is nothing but pure sugar. So that's when we would drink it though, but it's not, or eat it. That's not much though, and that's the only time. And immediately following a very hard cardio workout. Studies have shown that if we consume about 100 calories or a little bit more of high glycemic index carbohydrates immediately afterwards, we're talking that window is not open very long, then that glucose can go through your system, digest and absorb, and stores glycogen because you're still revved up. But when you're not revved up, if you're eating it, you're only doing it to satisfy your urges. And I get it. I mean, come on. Sugar, and I'm going to use the word sugar here, but it tastes awesome, right? I mean, we all know that it's addictive for a reason, and it truly is addictive. Sugar is. I mean, it's been shown to spike dopamine and serotonin levels, so you are going to crave it. But like any drug that isn't good for you, the craving isn't going to get you anywhere. I know it's not easy. I'm just saying that just be aware that you're not doing yourself any good when you do it, unless you're in the middle of a hard workout or immediately afterwards. There's no place for it. Harpreet, my brother from another mother. I know you're my man and we talk all the time, and you're going to laugh when you hear this. But every time you get that coffee drink that you love so much, you are drinking pure sugar and high glycemic index carbs. And it's just going to come back to haunt you, brother. I know that. And you know why? Because every time I fall prey to it and get those stupid vanilla chai lattes from Starbucks, I'm doing the same thing. So people, I'm by no means perfect. Please understand that. When I give this information, I'm not sitting up here on the pulpit coming down on you. I mean, I talk about things that I want to learn and I want to do better at. I mean, I have the knowledge. I don't always follow it, just like you're not going to. But just be aware that that's what we're doing when we're consuming high glycemic index carbohydrates. That's what we're doing. All right. And one final point on this. I see a lot of people that, they hear this information, and a lot of people that listen to these podcasts and are going to gyms and are on social media looking for help, they want to lose weight. They end up hearing stuff like this. They hear the thing about, needing the high glycemic index carbohydrates while they're training, while they're running, while they're biking, while they're swimming, and they think, well, that's good. But keep in mind, you're not going to lose weight when you do that, because now you're replacing the calories that you want to be burning. So when you're trying to lose weight, you don't really want to add added carbohydrates to your workout. And I see people do that. I see a lot of people that I don't know, and I never say anything in gyms because I'm a big believer in minding my own business and leaving people alone. If somebody wants to ask me something, they will. But other than that, I don't say a word. But I do feel bad for them because, you can tell they're trying to lose weight, and then they have that big thing of Gatorade and they really think they're doing the right thing. They really, really do. And there's just not enough, good information floating around out there to help them where they can kind of see that, because right now we have like feast or famine style thing going on in fitness. We have people that are so elite on social media, and then you have people at the other end, and rarely do you see anything in between. And what we need is a lot more in between with people. Okay. So I always tell people, like, when they want to train for a marathon, don't do it and lose weight at the same time, because we don't want you to not have your carbohydrates when you're out there on your long run, because that can be dangerous. We don't want you to run out of fuel. But it's also not the time to be losing weight. So I always prefer people to lose the weight and then train for the marathon so they can have proper nutrition. All right. Hope all this helps. It's a great topic, and I will be looking for more questions from you. Now I want to thank our second sponsor, chiropractic physician, Dr. Doris Antos of Ormond Beach. She's phenomenal. She has a great social media page, by the way. I see a lot of the great work she does. And she has a new assistant, and I believe we're going to be interviewing him and her here very soon. And I will put their information in today's show notes. And until next time, be Max Fit, be Max Well.